Okay, so I love systematic world building. Hard magic, speculative biology, fantasy geopolitics, conlanging, technology and culture. It all just makes my brain go brrr. And I think you should love it too. So this is my love letter to systematic world building, and why it's perfect for TTRPGs. And that's probably why you're already doing it. So what do I mean by systematic world building? Essentially, this is a creative exercise of world building, where instead of doing the actual creation itself, you first create the rules of the world, and then follow those rules out to their natural consequences. It makes world building almost more into an exercise of exploration or discovery. Despite my own preferences leaning towards more scientific or realistic systems for world building, see the Verve Worldbuilding series, it doesn't have to be. Your rules can be scientific, or esoteric, or artistic, or arbitrary. They can be meta rules around themes and genre, or they can be in-universe rules like laws of nature or edicts from in-world gods. For example, the Fae in many fantasy settings behave under a set of laws, even if those laws are often unintelligible or immoral to the common folk. The point is to have some system which dictates or informs decision-making about the world and what happens in it. So why do I love systems-based world building? Surely all of this rule building is just limiting your creativity. Why not just let you create whatever you want? Well, on the subject, there is a fantastic video by Trekiros about random tables for TTRPGs, which I will link here, but Trek has also kindly given me permission to include a key excerpt for my purposes. Roll the clip!
There is a famous quote by Mark Rosewater, the lead game designer for Magic the Gathering. In other words, someone whose entire career is to come up with about 1,000 new cards per year and somehow make them not boring. In his talk, 20 Years, 20 Lessons Learned, Mark sums up his creative process like this: restrictions breed creativity. Let's do a quick exercise to show how it works. Come up with a cool encounter, right now. I'll give you 10 seconds. And it has to be something new, you can't just use an encounter you've already come up with before. No? Got nothing? Don't worry, that doesn't mean you lack creativity. It just means in this exercise, your creativity is not being seeded properly. The starting point is one that doesn't lend itself to reaching an interesting destination. So now let's do a second exercise. Come up with a cool encounter, but that encounter has to involve 3 things. 1. A spatula, 2. A shark, and 3. An incredibly handsome flying eyeball construct who you are definitely subscribed to. I've added restrictions, but right now your brain is probably being flooded by encounter ideas. You're wondering how the shark and the modron and the spatula might fit together in a way that makes sense, a bit like you're trying to solve a puzzle. Is the modron maybe defending itself from the shark by fighting it off with a spatula? Is there a shark riding modron who is on a quest to find and destroy the unholy spatula of chaos? This is how you hack your brain into being more creative. By restricting the field of possibilities, you avoid choice paralysis and avoid falling back into your comfort zone.
I fully agree with this thinking, and Trek demonstrates it really well. Limitations breed creativity. I am also an amateur board game designer. I have a card game I'm hoping to publish sometime soon. But what really inspires me about making card and board games is the very small set of components you have to play around with. Cards, dice, tokens, boards. That's just about it. But that limitation is what makes it so interesting and motivating to come up with unique ways to use them. In Trek's video, the limitations came from random tables prompting creative encounters. And I see systematic world building as doing something very similar. So, the first reason I love rules for world building is because it's a limitation, and those limits make creation so much easier, and they inspire new ideas. For example, when creating the Verve initially, I didn't have any intentions for dragons to be in the world. I hadn't really thought about it. But when the announcement for Dragon Week was made, I was immediately inspired to figure out how I could fit a dragon into the setting. And to be honest, everything about my dragons was created in less than an hour. It was super easy and fun to come up with, because the limitations of the magic system and the limitations of what a dragon was came together to spark ideas. In fact, it almost felt more like I discovered the Verve dragons rather than made them. And this is one of the magical bits of systematic world building. It basically builds itself. It's almost like you just set up the dominoes and then get to watch as everything falls into place around you. You have control over the initial conditions and the process by which things can progress, but from then on, you sacrifice control to let things grow organically. In that way, building in these worlds is constantly surprising. It feels very much like being a player in somebody else's world, which you get to explore. In fact, this is where you are more or less already doing a form of systematic world building if you play TTRPGs. When you create a character, you might also create a hometown, a family, a faction. You'll establish motivations, values, and flaws. Your fellow players will also do their own acts of creation. And then, you all come together and see what happens, following the rules of the game world, the mechanics of the game system, and the limitations and motivations of each character. You sacrifice some agency to the dice and to the other players, so that the story that results is exciting and has direction. These systems inspiring what happens next. You obviously have some control, but if you wanted full control, you wouldn't be playing a TTRPG, you'd just write a book. The game mechanics and the social contract of the table ensure outcomes make sense in the given world or genre, and an emergent narrative can form. This is why systematic world building works so well specifically for TTRPGs. Just as the game mechanics tell you that a weak character can't smash through the heavy door, or if they can, how they would have to work around their weakness to achieve this. The world building mechanics tell you why there can't be a massive tree in the middle of a desert, or if there is, what source of water or cultural tradition or magical power keeps that tree alive. Returning to Trek's video, he explains random tables, when done well, can be another form of this same thinking, a limitation on what happens next in your game, which can surprise and inspire. If you're looking for an encounter to put in front of your players while travelling through a mountain range, you could use a random table, and then figure out how to make those results fit within your world system. Or you can use the rules of the world to populate a random table, so that everything on the table makes sense. Either way, you end up with an unpredictable encounter, which doesn't break immersion and the consistency of your world. Having a rule system for world building makes the DM's life considerably easier. But this benefit doesn't just apply to the one running the game, it also really benefits players. We in the TTRPG community often opine of the value of players coming up with creative solutions to situations. And that includes me. It's a key principle of the design of my TTRPG. But if you wanted your players to be creative, they need to know what tools they have at their disposal, the limits of their abilities, and the space in which they can act. If you're playing Cyberpunk, if you don't know what netrunning, cyberware, and the other technology of the setting can and can't do, it's going to be almost impossible to come up with a creative plan unique to that setting. Moreover, if you do have that understanding, it will often spark ideas. Again, limitations are inspirational, and those ideas are much more likely to work and fit with the game's world and genre. And that's the most obvious benefit to having a systematic world-building approach. By returning to your rule set for each decision, you can make sure the whole setting fits together thematically and sensibly. If you want a grimdark setting, it would be really out of place to have something colourful and friendly, so these settings often establish things like the sun has gone missing, or some magical fog covers the land. From a systems thinking approach, there will be a whole load of knock-on consequences. Like, okay, plants are going to be dying. That's going to affect food production, so people will be hungry and desperate, so crime will increase, nations are going to start collapsing, etc., etc., etc. At all stages, when you plan your next settlement or build your next character, the process will be influenced by these restrictions, and thereby reinforce the theme. Conversely, ignoring established world-building rules can lead to some really discordant results that might break immersion or provide too much contrast. One thing that's often bothered me about the world-building of D&D and the Forgotten Realms is how it seems to ignore many of the mechanics established in the rule system. If a medieval fantasy world had teleportation, summoning, and mind control, things would look very, very different in terms of the way the world behaves, what resources are valued, and how whole civilizations are structured. It's an issue, I think, that comes from D&D being what I might somewhat dismissively call kitchen sink fantasy. If you want something more focused, you might need to add further limitations on what can take place. But not only do systems mean that each new bit of world building will make sense, it also means that those new creations will naturally link into the previous bits you've built, having a cumulative effect. You can see this in the Verve, how the magic system inspired the currency system, which inspired the dragons, and the magic system inspired the core frequency, which inspired the religions, which inspired cool world-building locations, some of which would make cool places for a dragon to nest, or religions might influence the way money is made. It all links together, and it's something I'm keen to do more of in the future because it's just so satisfying and beautiful. So, in summary, systems for world-building provide constraints, which spark creativity, allow the world to magically build itself out of natural consequences, takes agency away in much the same way as game mechanics do, which makes it very synergistic with TTRPGs. It makes sure your world has a cohesive theme, and therefore maintains immersion. And it allows your world-building efforts to multiply by linking back to the other bits you've already created. I hope that you too now see the value and beauty in this kind of approach. Or, if you already did, have enjoyed my affectionate ramblings on the subject. If you enjoy world-building content, hit like and subscribe, as there's plenty more to come from the Verve. Thanks so much for watching.